of his arms. Both of them reflect his devotion to Braddock. On his left arm are the numbers of Braddock's zip code, and on Fetterman's right arm are the dates of 9 murders that occurred in the town while he was mayor. Think about that. There is, of course, much more to John Fetterman, including his stroke and how he beat Dr. Oz this week to be.
Okay, Lori, can we do a sound check on you?
Why don't you do it on Richard right now?
Roger, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Keep going, Richard.
This
Just
is Rick. Okay.
no, yeah, but just keep going with
all
your
right. Oh.
so that we can.
Okay. And then so that's a second and third segment. What I want to do, what we can do, is dig into a sample of what he does with people in the workshops.
Okay.
Sample activities. What does it sound like? What does that look like? That'll lend
Excellent.
itself to
Excellent.
stories, the value of it. So that's second and third segment.
Great. And Stuart, why don't you go ahead and say a few things?
Good morning. Just this week, coincidentally, I had my annual checkup with my doctor, who I adore. And he bought my book. He had read it. He said he did.
And then he bought it.
And then he bought it. And what I love about going to visit him is that we spend most of the time talking about each other's families. And then eventually he starts poking around in my ears, my nose, and so forth and so on. But yeah, I really value my
Thank you.
relationship with this guy.
And Lori,
Yeah,
can we try you
yeah.
again?
Sure. We're going to be talking about art and healing. Well, we've talked about art and healing for the patient in many shows. We're going to continue our discussion of art and self-care for the caregiver, art of medicine,
Excellent.
art of caregivers. Ta-da.
Okay.
Art for care.
Let's see.
Yep, art for caregivers, and it's the choreography of care, engaging caregivers in creative expression.
I'm going to give you a physical cue, and that will mean, and start
I'm
the
not hot
counter,
through here.
and
Does
that
it
will
matter?
start the music.
Do we need
Okay,
them?
can
we'll
you
check
hold?
that soon. We'll check that next.
Give me a second. I need to get everybody to have their
Headset.
corrected. So can you put on the radio for us so that I can use that?
Many listeners know that I train on human inclusivity
tell
and on
me
how to be
who hears
welcoming to
this.
diverse humans.
Got it.
Today, organizations of all sizes find that they need to train team members on equity and dismantling racism. I can do that. Many say that my trainings change how they see the world. And now I'm doing all of my work online so everyone can attend regardless of where you're located. For more information, go to elliekrug.com. Thank you. I look forward to hearing from you.
I'm Candy Brothel, publisher of the Twin Cities edition of Natural Awakenings magazine.
I never know.
Give me just a moment more and I'll be set. I'm just going to write one quick thing from my notes. I'm just going to put Stuart Pimsler right here. And so I can see it right up next to Rick. Did you ever see the Saturday Night Live show about Rick, when the stepchild has a relationship with her stepfather Rick, and she's a hyper child. Rick. I sometimes hear her voice.
Kind of rings a bell, but
She's very
don't
cool.
remember the
I
whole
love.
name. Sounds pretty funny.
It was very funny, and every once in a while, I think of her when I say your name. All right. Does everyone feel good? Do you know which excerpt that if he calls on you to do an excerpt that you'd want to do first? Okay, good. And I will support you.
Yeah. So you want to talk first as normal?
Yes, I will start off the introductions, but then
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
bank lob it over with Rick Bernardo, our co-host, will be leading the conversation with Stuart Pimsler today. Okay?
I'll be here.
Yes, you are. And you can make your introduction of Stuart and kind of take it from there. I'll be more of the lead in, lead out. But if I
Okay.
have a question, I'll jump in.
Yeah, do.
I will.
Because it's very loose.
Yep.
Yeah, as you know.
And it's a good conversation.
Okay, stand by. I guess the music will be your cue. Really.
Yeah. And have you guys can hear that? Did you hear that or not?
I kind of heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Stand by.
Good morning and welcome to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. I'm glad you've made the connection and are with us today. I'm Lori Fitz, your host, and the goal of our show is to explore a wide range of topics that challenge us to see ourselves, our community, and the world around us in ways that get us talking, get us thinking, get us imagining, and perhaps inspired or challenged to do something because we made the connection. Rick Bernardo is my co-host. He's an ethicist and an artist and a musician and a comedian and an all-around interesting cohort and a co-host in crime here with us on Connections Radio Show. And we're going to be having Rick lead the conversation today. And he has invited a colleague and friend, Stuart Pimsler. Stuart was on our show on September 19th. If you'd like to go back and listen to that show, we'd love to have you listen to that as well. But Rick, I'm going to let you introduce and talk a little bit about the last show.
It's all there on the AM 950 website, and there is a page for Connections Radio that's easy to find on the program broadcasts link there. And Stuart Pimsler, and I met him for the first time 6-7 years ago at a Connecticut college gathering in the Midwest. It sounds like we did that in the middle of a prairie or something. But and I did not know that Stuart had gone to Connecticut College, and I found out later on he had has a master's in I have it here somewhere. Master's degree basically at Conn College in dance and theater arts, and that's probably why I hadn't run into him a whole lot, because it was a different echelon. But he also founded and oversees as an artistic director Stuart Pimsler Dance and Theater in Minneapolis, and he works all over the place. The last broadcast we talked about his book, The Choreography of Care: Engaging Caregivers in Creative Expression, and he's best to describe the work, but it's fascinating as a one of the things that's a strength of many colleges now, including Connecticut College years ago. I go back to the 1800s class, is interdisciplinary work, and I was always led to think across disciplines, which, when you think about it, are just they have a history of being labeled. Well, that's biology, and that's dance, and that's religion, and so. But there's connections all over the place. Here we are on Connections Radio. So, Stuart, good morning. Good to have you back
Good
here.
morning, Rick. Good morning, Lori.
And a little more about Stuart. The company, Stuart Pimsler Dance and Theater, has been presented throughout the United States and internationally in Canada and Europe and Taiwan, Russia, Bermuda. That's a lot of places. And there's a counting list ongoing. And he's been doing this work. In fact, just about 3 weeks ago, I came across some people at an art exhibit that knew Stuart's work and had been involved in it because they had been involved with health education. So anyway, Stuart, good morning again. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Could you let us know a little more about, let's recap. There was what got you into dance, number one, and what led you to really pushing the field of dance into, I always see dance as healing in a lot of ways, but what led to this sort of form of it? Because you're doing workshops with institutions and individuals all about how do we care for the caregiver, professional or not. And that seems such an ongoing need. But what led to that again?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that lead in. So, my connection to dance was later in life. I was in college, I was an English major during the Vietnam era. So, I became very caught up in the politics of the time. And upon graduation, I had two choices. One was I was applying to go into graduate writing programs or law school. Again, obviously, both of those having nothing to do with dance. And I chose law school because I thought it would be a good outlet for me to direct my political interests. And I was mistaken. That was not the best choice for me. But while I was in law school, I was dating a dancer.
But you did graduate from law school, right?
I did graduate. I
you
took the bar in New
took the
York,
bar
and
and
I
everything.
passed. Yes, yes. And that was my fond farewell to that part of my life. Because during
Congratulations.
law school, thank you so much. I'm saying this with all due respect to all of the lawyers out there in your listening land.
Mhm.
But in law school, I was not a happy camper. And my girlfriend at the time, a dancer, suggested maybe I try a dance class. And I was an athlete growing up, did a lot of sports, and I walked into a dance class and I was smitten. I thought this is addressing a need that law school was not at the time. I didn't know specifically what that was, but I learned about what that need was later.
Did you find that it was a physical and spiritual and emotional? I mean, did it create that cross section for you? Is that part of what ignited?
Yes, yes. And since you mentioned that, Lori, in your question, that might be a good lead in to something that I mentioned in my book, which is described by WHO, the World Health Organization, when they talk about the definition of what it means to be a healthy human being. And I quote, this is from my book, a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And
I love that.
yeah, I
Because so often we think of healthy as just healing. You think of health, you just take the th off, healing from being ill versus celebrating what it means to be alive.
yes. And I think this is a very contemporary, enlightened, and I think informed sense of what it means to be healthy. That there's things we can do to contribute to our own health before we go and seek out our beloved caregivers.
Mhm.
But getting back, Rick, to your second part of your question, which was, how did I get into this work? So here I am. I'm now, just to move my autobiography along a little bit, here I am in law school. I've graduated. I've decided after taking the bar, this is not for me. I decided I really want to be a dancer. Well, I'm in my mid-20s at this point, not an ideal time to begin the study of dance.
Where so many start at like 3 or 4.
Correct, correct. And luckily, I find somebody who's running an MFA program at Connecticut College who's interested in individuals who have had a somewhat circuitous route to the field of dance. Well, here I am. I am the epitome of circularity and entering the field. And we connect. She invites me to come be a MFA fellowship student at Connecticut College. I do my master's. I graduated, started a dance company. And I was always, and I think this is attributed to my interest in politics, I was always interested in trying to find ways to connect my audiences more to the work. Rather than being passive viewers, how can I get them involved? And so coincidentally, as the title of your radio show is connections, we early on in our dance company started a program called Community Connections, which was finding ways to connect with community, to bring them and have them participate in our work. And we were part of a larger genre of work that has been going on for a while in the field of the arts called community inclusive, community engaged work. And it was from that interest that we were then led to the healthcare community, which is a whole other story that comes from a work that I created in memory of my mother, who died when I was 15. And it was from that work that we created a bridge to the healthcare community.
Thank you so much. And that word health that we had talked about, I always try to remember it derives from a key word that just means whole. And there's always different levels of wholeness for all of us. And it's not always alone. We become whole with other people and in dialogue with other activities, other connections. So the website for Choreography of Care is actually choreographyofcare.com. That's the best place to go to find out, get a window into that work.
You also have another website, stuartpimsler.com. Which is the best one to get your book?
The best one is choreographyofcare.com. Very easy. You can read excerpts. You can have a background more fully described than I just did. And there's a little button you can push for either a paperback or a hardcover edition of the book.
I love that you address the need for and the nature of caregiving. And you look at it with health professionals, but you have a broader definition. Anyone who needs to be caring for another can benefit from the arts and can benefit from the dance and the exercises and the ideas that you recommend.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I really enjoy mentioning in these settings is the fact that creativity, like running, walking, any other physical pursuit, acts similarly with our brain and our whole neurology, in that there is the same kind of release, serotonin release, that occurs when we all experience that elevation of feeling good when we've accomplished some physical activity. Creativity does that same thing to us. And so I like thinking about creative engagement as an aerobic activity.
And with that, we'll go to our commercial break and be able to share in our next segment some exercises and ideas that you have to recommend for us to be thinking about creativity. Thanks so much, Stuart, and great job in bringing a great guest and leading our conversation, Rick.
Stand by, please. Roger. Yes.
Okay, great. Second question is, Rick, asked that his voice so is he fully
No, he's been registered.
registered?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we're ready to go at any point. Okay, stand by, please.
No. Can you? No, thanks. No, we were just doing a review, so no. If you can erase that. Yes.
Anyway, I was just going to ask about a sample activity, and then there's related questions that will come up around, like, why.
Yeah.
Or
How or
and stories about it.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
That's all.
All right. So as soon as Dan gets that fixed, I am ready now. Welcome back to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. And today, my co-host Rick Bernardo is going to be leading our conversation with Stuart Pimsleur. Stuart has written an amazing book called The Choreography of Care, Engaging Caregivers in Creative Expression, and it's now available. And you have some great ideas about sharing about this book. Rick?
Me?
Yes, you, Rick.
Who, me?
Yes, you.
That's that look on my face perpetually anyway. Who, me? Stuart Pimsleur, by the way, he works with populations including students, caregivers, audiences, and community members. And choreographyofcare.com is the best place to go about that work. And his workshops are I was just saying in the previous segment, they're cross-disciplinary. They're about wholeness and healing. But I wanted to get now. I have a background in theater and some other physical activities. I guess we all do, and so I can
As
imagine
in physical activity.
Yeah, physical activities. Yeah, I always use my body for something.
Something.
Though. I
So
mean,
it comes in handy.
even if it's just sitting here. But but it's important to remember that. I mean, that's silly the way I put it, but there's
But no, but
there's a
I think
truth there.
there is a truth, and I was teasing you
Yeah,
back, but
yeah,
so often we
yeah.
can get in our head
Yeah,
and we think that's where we live.
Well,
and then we get on social media or we get
Yeah.
on the computer and that's our identity or whatnot. And
yeah,
really,
yeah.
we have a body that we should use more.
There's no way to show up without our body,
That's true.
really.
That's
So it's so important to remember that. So in that vein, though, there's this choreography of care work that, especially for caregivers, I think we all know how in deep need they are for caring for themselves. So some examples, just one example of what kind of activity do the people you work with what is that sort of group and what does it look like to do a module in a workshop?
So before I answer that, I just wanted to preface it, if it's all right, with another excerpt from my book that talks about why it's important that caregivers engage in creativity. And this is from page 113 in my book, where I talk about research in the US and elsewhere continues to document the arts' impact on health while being extolled by distinguished health experts such as Vivek H. Murthy, the 19th Surgeon General of the US. And I'm quoting him: "Within the arts lies a powerful but largely untapped force for healing. The arts and sciences are two sides of the same coin, which is our shared humanity." Dr. Murthy opines that one's ability to live a fulfilled, healthy life depends on ways to bring the arts and sciences together. So this is not just me as an artist saying, gosh, I'm an artist, I love what I do, and I think everybody should do it. But rather, there's now hard research that shows the ways in which creativity actually not only sets off certain healing chemicals in the body, but just one's general state of being is enhanced by the implementation of creativity into one's life. So I thought it was important to mention that before I go into talking about one of the wild and crazy exercises that we do in our workshops.
And before you even do that, my background is in science and religion, and there's a long list of scientists who will extol the virtues of creativity. You can't analyze something without the other side of that coin being somehow creative. You've got to imagine. Einstein is famous for saying imagination is the most important tool for him. Let alone envisioning and then embodying all of that. So anyway, there's so many connections. I'm with you there.
Yeah, and there are now other authors talking about the value of creativity, not just for healthcare providers, but throughout the corporate sector. Daniel Pink, in one of his books, talks about the importance of the ways in which corporations are valuing creativity and hiring artists to bring them into the workplace. But let's talk about a particular exercise that we at Stuart Pimsleur Dance and Theater have created. We've, like a lot of the work in dance, there's a tradition of handing work down through the ages. And this is an exercise that we borrowed from a colleague that we credit. It's called Landscapes. And each time we offer creative exercise to healthcare providers, we always try to have it connect to their workplace so that they can understand why we're asking them to do some of these things that are really out of their comfort zone, and let them experience it and then make the connection at the end, which I'll do as I explain what this is. So Landscapes, what is that? It's an exercise that we do with healthcare providers mainly to talk about their observational skills. Healthcare providers, as we all know, typically are in a rush. There's a lot of patients to see. During the pandemic, as we all know, they were overworked, overextended.
And pushed by insurance very often to have X number of minutes and X number of folks that they see in order to make, unfortunately, quotas.
Yes. And so they're constantly in action mode. They're doing. And what this exercise that we do with them it emphasizes is observation. To take a breath when you come into a room before you go into your checklist of usually a chart that talks about how's your health, how's your weight, how's your ache, but to look at them. And I have to say, coincidentally, this week, I went to my annual checkup. My doctor is an osteopath, and he's incredible. He just read my book, and we've been seeing each other for years. He walked into the office where I was sitting, and he just stood there. And he looked at me, and I didn't ask him. This was different in the past, but he had the feeling that he was playing back to me some of these exercises.
That he
And
paid attention.
He paid attention, and I appreciated it. So Landscapes, what is that? It starts as a duet. We have one person make a shape, any kind of shape. We talk about the positive space that is inhabited by one's body and the negative space, which is where the empty space around one's body. So there's positive space and negative empty space. And we ask the person who has not made the shape to look at their partner, who is now kind of statuesque. Imagine any kind of statue, the Statue of Liberty, a famous Rodin sculpture.
The thinker.
The thinker, right. And the thinker has different negative spaces.
Yes.
And so we ask them to look and then to walk around the person and observe the shape. And then we ask them to make a complementary shape to their partner, hold that shape, and the first person dissolves their shape and starts to walk around and observe their partner shape. So it becomes this kind of ping pong match.
And iterations.
And iteration, yes.
Talk about awareness. Yeah.
And awareness.
Yeah.
And it's really about looking at each and every detail of the person before making a choice. So, of course, children love this game.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Adults at first feel a little out of place, but once they start to engage, they're really in it.
What's wonderful is I think of someone maybe being nervous and wanting to do it right, and
Yeah.
being able to learn that there is no absolute right. There's only interpretation. And what can you do with that?
Yeah, awesome. And one of the core concepts behind creativity is play, which does not have an agenda exactly. It's just like you just do things, and that's a core thing. So thank you.
Yeah.
I want to continue our conversation and questions in our next segment because we're running out of time on this
Yeah.
one. But I'd love to question in more about how that exercise impacts people.
Will
But I
do.
also want to let folks know that they can go to choreographyofcare.com to get
Thanks.
this book. And we'll be
Awesome.
right back after just a few short commercial breaks.
Stand by then.
So I think we'll have time.
Okay. Are you ready?
You good?
Pretty much.
Yep. And you've got the exercise as well as an excerpt if you want to share during this one.
I don't know if I have an excerpt, but yeah, I can.
Okay, an exercise, great. Yep, we're good. We're good. No, we don't need an excerpt. All right, we're good.
Okay, stand by.
Welcome back to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. I'm glad you've made the connection and are with us today. I'm Lori Fitz, your host. And our co-host, Rick Bernardo, will be leading our conversation today with Stuart Pimsler. Stuart was on the show back in September 19th. So if you want to go back to am950radio.com and scroll down to the connections and you click on that connections icon, you can go to September 19th and here's some backstory to the book that he's written. And the book is called The Choreography of Care: Engaging Caregivers in Creative Expression. And it's available. And so you can just go right to that website and pick it up. It's a terrific book.
Exactly what she said. I'm Rick, and we've got Stuart Pimsler with us, and good to see you again. Good morning.
Good morning.
And we were just looking and hearing about an activity called landscapes that you do with caregivers. From what I'm hearing, it really just stimulates and practice them noticing
And
their
being in the moment.
own selves in the moment with
Mhm.
others without too much of an agenda. But we were going to continue that
Yeah,
because this
and
is
just
fascinating.
a quick recap for those who maybe just be joining us. A person notices a person who's in a pose and does their best to create that pose for themselves. Is that
Yeah, more about
there we
complementing
go.
the pose.
So it does turn into a different pose.
Yeah, so
Almost like ongoing puzzle pieces of some kind.
Correct.
maybe.
I think that's a great description, Rick. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never been there, but okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So as they create the complementary pose, then the next person will do the same.
Correct.
So you have complementary to complement, and the complement to the pose that person has just done. When they complement it, it may not look like the first pose. Is that right?
Not at all. It's not about copying it. It's about
Right.
complementing it.
There we
So
go.
it's about listening
Mhm.
and seeing and responding. And again, those are elements that we try to underline for all of our exercises so that we're asking the caregivers to create, but then extrapolate from their creative experience how it relates to the workplace. And if I could just touch on another excerpt
Sure.
from my book that talks about how landscapes, this exercise, particularly relates to entrances and exits. So caregivers are constantly entering a space where they have a patient and leaving. I mean, that is functional for them. They have to go in and out of a room
And my guess is they're in their head a lot.
in their head. And
but-
again, they're constantly in action.
Mhm.
They're coming in to do something
And check off the box.
and check off the box. But in that moment of coming in, a patient is looking. And so we pose some of these prompts as part of this exercise. and this is from my book, how do caregivers come into the space of their patients? Do they begin talking at the door or wait until they are at the bedside? A caregiver beginning a conversation while hand washing with back turned may cause the patient to feel slighted and irritated. How can I hear you with the water running? How can the caregiver convey a sense of really being present versus merely passing through on their way to the next stop? How will the caregiver depart from the room? And again, we don't offer judgments about their choices, but these are prompts to have them think about what they're doing in their own practice.
I have to share a quick story about exactly that. When I was in the hospital, I had just had surgery on an accident I had on my ankle, and they had to rebuild my ankle. Fascinating, great doctor, known for doing great work. Was very grateful that he did it. Terrible bedside manner. So he had teaching. It was a teaching hospital. Brought in all these folks, and they never said anything to me. They just were talking about my ankle and never addressed me. And it was all about my leg and all about how they could teach about what he had done. And finally, I said, stop. I
Mm.
want each one of you to greet me. I want you to know that I am a human being. I am not just an ankle. You may then go along and talk about whatever you want, but you must all stop now
Yeah.
and say hello to me, who is the owner of that ankle.
It's connected
Yeah.
to this person here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, Lori, that dynamic is a part of the work that we're doing. That is that it's our own health is not the sole responsibility of our caregivers.
Mhm.
That we as consumers need to be advocates for ourselves. And so bravo to you for doing that.
Well, it comes down to humanity as well. It's not just me. I'm hoping it make a difference for them going into the next room.
Yep.
That, hey, whoever it is, connect with the human being first. And then have at it with all that you need to do to teach each other.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
let's remember humanity.
Yes.
And let's also observe that there's no need to blame anybody about doing things right or wrong in this conversation. It's mainly about they can't be who they ought to be, in the words of Martin Luther King, unless the others are who they ought to be too, as well. So there's this sort of win-win in the sense of just noticing and making choices that supports everybody's health and wholeness.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. In that moment, I did feel whole.
Yeah,
I felt like I was an
got
ankle.
it. Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was something missing, I think. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
So,
Uh,
so
Go
are
ahead.
there aha moments for the doctors when they go through these prompts?
Yeah, I think that it's, of course, in our workshops, it becomes cumulative. Each exercise hopefully continues to open up new insights for the caregivers. And, as we build the regimen of our exercises, we go from what we believe are perhaps the safest. We always want the participants to be successful. So we go and remembering that they're doing creative engagement kinds of things that are not commonplace to them. I don't know how many doctors are, dancing in between their visits to the caregivers. It would be lovely if they were all doing that in outside in the hallways, but I would think most are not. And so we build a kind of momentum with our exercises, and we typically end with the most challenging. And this one, as the landscapes relates to observation, the last one that we do, which is called lifts, and it's self-explanatory, but I'll describe it anyway, is about support. How to let yourself be supported, or how to support somebody else. Now, the latter, supporting somebody else, comes with the workplace, right? That's what caregivers are doing. But along the way, what are they doing to get their own support, which then goes to, of course, self-care. So lifts is just as it says. It's about being lifted by a group of others. So the way that works is we'll set up a small group, more than two, because most people cannot pick somebody else up by themselves, and depending on size. We usually have a group of 4 to 6 people, and each person takes turns being held by the others.
Mm.
We show them safe ways to do that, bending knees, keeping their spine supported underneath themselves as they lift, and to watch what happens when an orthopedic surgeon gets elevated off the ground is it's hard to describe.
Wow.
And in that moment, I hope that it shifts for them in some way,
Yes.
and that there's a shift in terms of I don't have to do it all.
Yes. Yes, I think that happens. Metaphorically, what this exercise does is sets up that release, I think, for participants, as well as just a kind of joy about experiencing what it's like to have your own weight being supported by somebody else and being held by somebody else.
And my guess is these doctors and caregivers have had a lot on their shoulders for a long time, and that takes its toll because every decision, every work, every moment that you are there for someone else, at what point can you get burned out from
Yes.
that?
And all these bodily terms we're using, having a lot on
Yeah.
your shoulders, having a
Yeah.
lot of money, saying things off the top of our head. We're full of language like that refers to our body. But the more we can be aware of just be in our bodies, man, that is a powerful image of a orthopedic surgeon being lifted up.
Yeah.
In a
Yes.
change. But also I see that connecting to different environments, not only we're always changing rooms and changing environments. And that's a big part between the landscapes activity you described before and this lifts one. There's that dynamic immersing people in with each other and the environment all over the place. So that is so cool.
Yeah, we one of the I don't want to dare to say one of the benefits of the pandemic. It wasn't a benefit. The whole thing was, of course, horrible.
But there were aha moments.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there was learning opportunities.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have taken away from the way that I was teaching online, as we all were, zooming, was I encourage participants to use the situation to their advantage in a lot of the nonverbal exercises. Specifically, I would encourage them to move as if nobody's watching. Because rather than a setting that we typically have of a workshop where everybody's gathered in one space, these workshops that we were doing during the pandemic, everybody was siloed away in their own space. So they had the advantage when I invited them to do something that was nonverbal and move. I said, if you feel uncomfortable, turn your video off and do it as if no one is watching. And now that I'm back live, I use that as a prompt. And I encourage them either close your eyes or try to get into a space where you really don't care about what it is you're doing.
And with medical care doing more in terms of connecting with Zoom and using that as a medium, and I see it in the future that we'll do more online work. That kind of support could be just wonderful to keep growing that sense of what does everyone need in the process. Getting back to what you said initially, how do we all become whole?
And just
Caregivers.
one window into that, as I grew up in a radio of family broadcasters, and they always said, even if you're on the phone, people can hear if you're smiling or not. We just are so attuned to that, the physicality of that.
And we have to go to break, but we'll be back for our last segment and learning more about the role the arts can play in healing for strained healthcare and caregivers. And the new book that Stuart Pimsler has written, The Choreography of Care, Engaging Caregivers in Creative Expression. So we'll be right back after just a few commercials, and we'll talk more about what can art do for our healing. We'll be right back.
Stand by, please. Give me a sign when you're ready, please.
Remember their original impulses for becoming healers. I don't know if is that all from her or transforming the doctor's-patient relationship. See, there's that and then there's that. So maybe they're just all both from the book or what?
Yeah, that's just the first part is hers, and
Okay.
they're both from the book. That's hers.
They're
and
just
this
pairing
is-
them?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll just maybe just go right to the other excerpt then. Okay.
You feel good?
Yeah, so we've got those two, and then we're still, anything else we want to say about lifts? Anything left over about that? It's a powerful image.
I think we got that.
I think so.
I think-
but
I think
if there is,
If you want to add anything, but I think that one feels good. That one feels,
maybe we'll just mention that we did, we looked at landscapes. we looked at
and then
lifts.
and encourage people to listen to the podcast if they missed it, so that way they can. Yeah.
Well, okay. That and the September 19th one as well.
Yep.
We could do
Yep.
that. I left it really open at the end just to promote the book and the
Yep.
value of this sort of cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary work.
Mhm.
I think it'll. How much time do we have now?
12. We do have 12, so we're good.
Okay. I'm just gonna, just jump in and it'll work.
Yeah, always does. All good. Thanks, Stuart. All right, we're set.
Okay, stand by.
Welcome back to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. I'm Lori Fitz, your host, and Rick Bernardo is hosting this show with me, and he is going to be kind of doing a wrap up with Stuart on our conversation that we've had today, as well as if you guys want to go back to September 19th and get some more backstory about how this book was developed and the importance of it, you can go back to September 19th. And to do that, just go to www.am950radio.com. Scroll down, you'll see a nice little icon with Connections Radio Show. Click on that and go to September 19th. And you can hear our first show with Stuart Pimsleur, who has written the book, The Choreography of Care, Engaging Caregivers in Creative Expression. It's now available. And the best way to get that book is to go to www.choreographyofcare.com. Rick,
I'm Rick.
you are Rick, and you
Still.
have invited Stuart, and you have helped lead this conversation. Thank you.
Sure. And I'm so excited to share any sort of cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary work, especially involving our physicality, which we really don't have a choice about right now in this life, and creativeness.
We
And,
do have a choice, though. We have a choice
Oh,
to,
what?
to more embrace
we have.
and a choice to
It's just
to
not.
really fully take in all that we sometimes ignore or run
Right.
over, and I think is part of why we get sick is that we don't pay
Exactly.
attention.
Exactly. And I was just saying that the all or nothing, we don't have a choice about. We're either physical or we're not.
Yeah, that's true.
And we're either alive or we're not.
Uh,
But anyway, fine tuning that to underscore what Lori is saying, to fine tune that, to increase our power in that, which is
Mhm.
not necessarily controlling people. It's just how do we really affect people for the better and inspire them? So that's what Stuart's work is about. And thank you. And Stuart, you were talking about two activities that you had done. Mentioned one called landscapes, and the other one was lifts. And there's that image I will always have in my head of an orthopedic surgeon being lifted up. I don't know why. I don't think I've ever seen that in my head ever before. Uh,
Yeah. So, of course, being lifted off the ground is an exercise that we wait to do after 2 or 3 days of workshops.
You
and
need the trust.
You need the trust.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for listeners to imagine things that are not so grandiose as being lifted off the ground, and what can happen in their everyday lives to improve their own physical, spiritual, emotional well-being. A lot of there are workshops now for everybody to take, whether it's yoga or spinal awareness or any kind of particular physical interest that one has, but which are great. But along the way, with a heightened awareness of our own daily habits and rituals, I strongly believe and advocate for our own individual caring for ourselves.
Yeah.
For example, a beloved uncle of mine who had a very rigorous corporate life in Midtown Manhattan. And he was a very, very much a physical creature. He would look for ways in his daily workplace that he could just continue to challenge himself physically. So what did that look like? And again, this is in the 60s and 50s. He spent a lot of time standing up when he would receive a phone call. The one thing that I also really remember him for, and I feel like it has spilled over into my own ways of going about my day to day, is he would, whenever an opportunity presented itself to make a choice between taking an elevator and climbing stairs, he would pick the stairs. And it could have been in the tallest skyscrapers in Manhattan. He would leave himself enough time so that he could get that kind of activity. And this was before the buildup and the popularity these days and the research.
Before the Fitbit.
Before the Fitbit, correct. So, and then my mentor in grad school, Martha Myers, who just passed away this year at the age of 96.
oh,
Before she passed, I helped to write her memoirs, and she decided to title her book, Don't Sit Down. And this was a dancer, choreographer, teacher her entire life. And when she was given a retirement party at Connecticut College, she was presented with a rocking chair. And she stood behind the rocking chair, looked at it, and said, nope, no thank you. I'm not going to do it. And that became kind of her mantra in the latter part of her life. So I think there's things we can do
Yeah.
that are not, you don't need an instructor for.
I also think giving ourselves permission, like you'd said in the last segment, how dance like nobody's watching, right? I remember when I was doing caretaking for my father when I was in high school who had a stroke. And there were times I just got angry because I had to repeat myself over and over again. And each time try and pretend it was the first time because I didn't want to be disrespectful. But if I had known or understood that maybe doing some dancing, I could work out some of that anger. I could have let go. I could have had a chance to, and you just don't think of that when you've got your to-do list of umpting things and you don't want to be selfish and go, I can't even take that time because I've got so much on my list.
Yeah.
I think if caretakers, whether they're doctors or in the family and you're dealing with a challenge, can just take a moment and go, let's dance. I mean, that it sounds revolutionary. It's really not. I mean, we learn to dance before we walk. So it's in our body to move.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that your listeners don't turn off the station because they've now heard the word dance.
No, I won't.
Because dance in the United States we've experienced is oftentimes a pushback.
Mhm.
People close down. It's like, oh, I don't want to dance. So I'm not talking about people going and getting lessons,
No.
but rather moving their body.
Self-expression.
Self-expression, just moving. Walking is a kind of dance. Running is a kind of dance. Being still is a kind of dance if there's an awareness
Mhm.
about that. It's a kind of movement. So our workshops, we don't have people come in and stand with their in a turned out balletic position and learn steps.
The 5 positions.
Right.
The thing I'm hearing from what both Lori and Stuart I mean, hear so many things in common, but there's in common this: how do we use our energy? There's an energy to anger, and it really is meant to go somewhere. If we don't have anywhere to go with it, it's miserable.
Mhm.
But if we have a way to express it, any emotion, if it has a way to express, we feel a release and we feel embodied. That is, if we know how to channel it, that's what being a powerful human can be.
And even noticing that anger at its root is probably a pain or a hurt. So
It-
how do you learn how
Yeah.
to perhaps let that hurt be expressed through movement?
And we a number of years ago we did a series of workshops for stroke survivors at North Memorial Hospital Stroke Center. A nurse who we had met at a nursing conference when we had done a presentation moved to Minneapolis and had gotten her own stroke, and she reached out to us, and we had never worked with stroke survivors before. And we were asked to create a performance work for stroke survivors and their caregivers. And the very first thing we did at the workshop was we asked each couple to remember and talk about the day that they had their stroke.
Wow.
And they did what you both just did.
Yeah.
They first went, oh, wow. But they then began to talk and write down, because we asked them to record that, what happened. And there was something that they all said that was deeply empowering to them about being asked to revisit that moment that they had not really discussed with anybody but their doctor. And that was just as a kind of setting
Right.
the ground for the fact pattern of their medical history. But talking about what that felt like and what it felt like afterwards, which in a lot of cases meant the stroke survivor losing some sort of ability that they had had, and now it was gone. What does that feel like to be diminished? And so in doing that, we were celebrating, their individuality, and they heard that there was a kind of commonality amongst each other, that they were and found a way to support each other by sharing those stories.
I can see where that could be healing. When you first said that day, it came back to me, vividly, that moment that we knew that he was having a stroke, and he had several. He had 2 to 3. So it's like 2 to 3 instances of each time getting worse over a period of December. And the first thought was, I just want to start bawling.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then the next thought is how good that would be, maybe.
Yes. Yes.
There's a wonderful excerpt from Stuart's book, The Choreography of Care, Engaging Caregivers in Creative Expression, about how research is proving that movement is not merely a physical and emotional response, although that's key. It's a form of embodied cognition. At the sensory level, the specificity of our movement provides clues to who we are. That's a great description of what we were just talking about. Choreographyofcare.com, that's the website. Stuart Pimsleur, we both went to Conn College, and so that it was the connection goes back decades.
And thank you, Stuart, for taking the time to explore art and healing.
Thank you both for doing what you guys do. I've been a joy being here. Thank you.
Well, you bring to light important things that so many people can think about in different ways. So that the caregiver who is employed, how do they incorporate that into their job? To folks who have been impacted by either chronic illness or an accident can think about how can art serve a role in their life, and the caregiver and the family. What can they do? And ultimately, it all comes down to let's dance, let's move,
Move.
let's celebrate who we are through the art of movement. So thank you. Stay with us for next week as well. Go get that book. Go get The Choreography of Care, Engaging Caregivers in Creative Expression.
See ya. Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I'm still Rick. Bye.
You're still Rick and Stuart's still here. And we're here for another 5 seconds. So thank you for being with us and for joining us next week on Connections Radio Show here on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
Lori, will this be for next week?
Lot of collaboration with. I think it's imperative that you understand what's the best way they want to communicate, and you play to the strengths of that person. Sometimes I solve problems better having a conversation with someone on the phone versus me trying to send a text or an email back. And for me, it seems like it drags out longer than it should, but that's on me. But I might be able to pick up the phone and say, this is what I meant by that. What do you think? And then that problem gets solved faster.
It only
for
takes
my
a minute.
coworker, they may realize that Joe McKenzie prefers to talk it through versus going back and forth on text or email. So I think it's up to you as an individual to know the best way, and that is really having a conversation with the people that you collaborate the most often with.
So do you think that question is that's something that should be put out there no matter what the situation, even in someone in job search mode?
Yes, I really do. I think you do not want to have any gaps or lost emails or lost voicemails. I think it's critical. Job search takes on a lot of communication modes. It could be through social media. It can be through text, voicemail, voice. Just knowing how you're going to communicate with someone in job search mode and be if you're engaging with employers, you also have to watch for. It's on you to make sure that you monitor your voicemail, you monitor your spam folders on your email, you watch for texts that may be coming from that employer. It's on you to make sure that you're not missing anything. And that's where I'd start for anybody, any age, is that getting a voicemail from someone like you did 20 years ago, it may be in an email or text form that they want you to come in and interview. Or if you're dealing with your network, you may be using, social media platforms to communicate back and forth. You have to monitor those regularly. Otherwise, you're going to miss meetings.
Wow, well said. Joe McKenzie, we're going to leave it right there. And if you'd like more information, you can always reach out to Joe McKenzie. His telephone number is a telephone, 763-438-1621. And he'll let you know the best way to leave that message. Joe McKenzie, always fine work. And you do some fine work at Ripple Connects.
Yes, we do. We turn candidates into contenders.
Taking prescription medication should not be a scary task. The staff at St. Paul Corner Drug makes certain you know everything about your prescription medication before you leave the pharmacy. Knowing what to expect and when and how to take your prescriptions gives you the confidence to safely take your medication and maintain good health. Should additional questions arise, we are here to help sort things out. St. Paul Corner Drug, pharmacy the way it should be, at stpaulcornerdrug.com.
Hi, I'm Mary T. of the Mary T. family of companies. Our new Camellia Rose Assisted Living and Memory Care is a bold reimagining of what assisted living can be. Our emphasis is on creative meals, outdoor walking paths, and a spectrum of restorative therapies and activities. We are founded on a history of care. We are dedicated to enriching lives. Learn more about Camellia Rose Assisted Living and Memory Care by visiting marytinc.com.
This is a news-oriented broadcast, and all information is educational nature, is not intended to be legal, securities, tax, or insurance advice. Please consult with the appropriate professional before acting on information heard during the broadcast.
You're listening to New Beginnings. New Beginnings with Freddie Bell.
Hi, everyone. I'm Freddie Bell, and now it's time to talk finance with Leibel Sternbach. Leibel is an Amazon best-selling author of Living with Financial Anxiety and Authenticity. Leibel, welcome back to New Beginnings. How are you this week?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, and I'm really excited to talk about today's topic because we've talked about it on the edges before. I'll say it that way. I'm looking at the idea that investing, in my opinion, investing strategies really don't get more classic than the so-called 60-40 allocation, holding 60% of your portfolio in stocks and 40% in bonds. And the thinking goes that you can get the best of both worlds, high growth potential from your riskier stocks and protection from your more conservative bonds. But I was also seeing a report, Leibel, that this could be the worst year ever for the 60-40 portfolio. How do you stand on that?
Well, I say, well, where I stand doesn't really matter. What matters is reality, right?
Yes.
And the reality is that, this is going to be one of the worst years for bonds. And here's the thing, right? It's like, people are acting surprised, like that bonds are having a really volatile year and that they're all over the place and they've lost more than, they've ever had in the last 20 years. But here's the thing, right? We knew this was coming. Anyone who understands how bonds work fundamentally understood that this is what's going to happen, that bonds were going